Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar, How Formulation Drives Feed Production Sustainability. This webinar is sponsored by Datacor, formerly Format Solutions, and presented by Aquafeed.com. My name is Lucia Barreiro, editor of Aquafeed.com, and I will be your moderator today. Before we begin, I would like to inform you that a Q&A session will follow our presentation today. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll answer as many as we can. I will also like to note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available tomorrow. Later in today's presentation, we will also be asking the audience to answer a few poll questions. Our speaker is looking forward to seeing your responses. Our speaker today is Ian Mealy. Ian is Product Marketing Director for Formulation at Datacor, formerly Format Solutions. Ian boasts over 30 years of experience with formulation software. His career began after he earned a degree in agriculture and joined a large UK cooperatives graduate program, where he acquired extensive experience in feed business operations. Ian's journey progressed from formulator to formulations manager, where he gained almost a decade of hands-on experience. Ian then moved to Format, now Datacor, starting as a support specialist. He has since performed various roles, including implementation, software product design, and consultation. With over 25 years at Datacor, Ian has collaborated with a global clientele across feed, aquafeed, pet food, premix, and food and beverage sectors. In today's webinar, we will look at how formulation software can help nutritionists understand the environmental impact of their feeds. Welcome, Ian. I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, and a pleasure to be here. Hello, everybody. I look forward to going through this presentation today and perhaps prompting some thoughts. I'm looking forward to your questions at the end. Lucia made an introduction to me, so I won't dwell on that. Just a little bit about Datacor. Datacor have been the parent company of Format Solutions for the last 3 years, and we have recently renamed ourselves from Format Solutions, who many of you may already know, to the Datacor name. Datacor provide software solutions to many sectors, including chemical, food and beverage, gas and oil, and other sectors. However, Datacor Animal Nutrition obviously focuses in the nutrition sector, and we've been a leading supplier of formulation and feed ERP to a worldwide customer base for nigh on 50 years. We're headquartered in New Jersey, in the US, but we have teams across 5 continents. One of those includes myself, where I'm based in the UK. So today we're going to aim to show how we can use formulation software to help evaluate and implement strategies that bring an understanding and improve the sustainability of our feed products. We're going to look at the significance of the recipe within this area, and then we'll discuss how optimization techniques within formulation can help us achieve sustainability goals within the formula, but also beyond that as well. And then we'll have the chance perhaps to look at what the future holds for formulation and its contribution to sustainability. Now, I guess many of you know some of this background, but just to frame the context, that from the perspective of global greenhouse gas emissions, the FAO have attributed over 30% of those emissions to the food production cycle, and 25% of that being related to animal products specifically. In terms of aquaculture, it's recognized from many sources that feed represents a large component of the greenhouse gas emissions within those production systems. One source giving 90% of a typical salmon production cycle being attributed to feed. Feed is also significant in terms of cost. It's an estimate of between, depending on production cycle, cycle or animal concerned, the production costs can be between 50 and 70% coming from feed. And of the feed, the ingredients within the feed are up to 80% of that cost in itself. So clearly, the feed itself and the ingredients we choose to include in those feeds have a significant contribution to the production cycle, both from a sustainability perspective, but also efficiency and cost perspective. Now, obviously it varies by region, but there's increasing pressure really throughout the supply chain for improved transparency in terms of what the footprint of the food chain is, and obviously, therefore, for meaningful progress in terms of greenhouse gas reduction. This coming from governments and industry targets, but this is actually transmitted from retailers and brands to their suppliers. And in turn, the pressure is coming from consumers. And therefore, this is coming through to our customers, our feed customers, the farmer. It's actually also been seen in the companion animal sector, the pet food sector as well. It's recognized, though, that in trying to achieve the transparency and the footprint reduction, costs are a challenge, and therefore several customers I speak to are looking at mitigation strategies, which sort of center really around increased efficiency, improving their understanding of environmental impacts of what they're doing, both the feed and their activities around that, improving ingredient sourcing, looking at alternative ingredients. But there's also aspects where any costs incurred may well have to be passed on through the food chain, the supply chain. But there may also be opportunities that it's recognized that the opportunities may exist through market segmentation and the advantage that may be gained from having a more sustainable approach. So in this webinar, we're going to look at some aspects of how technology can help the feed manufacturer play their part, because the feed manufacturer is going to be expected to play a part in addressing these challenges in improving sustainability. Now, given the significance of cost and nutrition in this whole equation, I'm going to discuss how formulation will play a central role in this. So before we go any further into detail, I've got a couple of poll questions, which it'd be really interesting to see, just to gauge from the audience where they sit. So just a couple at this stage. I've got a couple more a little later. The first question is just a very simple question. Does your company have sustainability goals? And so there's a screen come up for you now into which you can enter your vote, and would be interested to see the results from this. So please go ahead. Give you a minute or two to enter that one. And we'll move on to Marisa. Just let me know if we've received enough inputs there. Okay, so a very clear yes. I've asked this question in different contexts. Obviously, here in the Aquafeed context, I've asked it in pet food, and I've asked this question in animal feed. So dairy, beef, and pig and poultry. And the answers are slightly different. Here, it's very, very clearly yes. In other sectors, such as the animal feed sector, it was less clearly yes. More of many not actually knowing or even a no. So that's very interesting to see. Thank you for that. We'll move on to the next question, which is, given that we have those company goals, what do those goals focus on? Again, we'll give you a couple of minutes to reply to that question. And then Marisa, if you could just show the answers when we've received enough inputs. Yeah, a little bit longer. And here we go. The answers. Okay, so again, this is slightly different to previous polls I've carried out. And in previous polls, carbon has led the answer here, carbon emissions. So it's interesting to see the majority answering that multiple factors are the focus. So that's interesting to see. Thank you. Okay, so with that sort of background, I just wanted to reflect. Actually, we did, as Datacor, we did some research with a range of customers across multiple continents recently, different sectors, including aqua, pet, and animal feed, and asked them about their current situation and view regarding sustainability and their feed products. And it was clear that there were differences, but this showed that sustainability is generally high on the agenda and in the thoughts of all the customers we spoke to. And basically 4 out of 5 of the customers, if we think of it in proportion like that, we're saying, you know, it's a priority initiative. As I was just indicating in response to that poll, carbon footprinting led the focus really in those customers we spoke to. There was concern over generally whatever they were measuring, that the correct measurements were being applied. So there was concern over data quality. They were interested in aiming towards reduction and even neutrality. So the companies had within them policies for reduction and neutrality. Perhaps not all everybody was going for neutrality, but clearly reporting was very important in tracking this and wanting to know trends over time and also understand it through the full supply chain that they needed to analyze that. They recognized there was going to be cost impacts, and we'll be discussing this very shortly about what we can do, what those cost impacts might be and why, and what we can do about them. And they were forming strategies around managing those. But they also saw opportunity. Help customers, my customers rather, feed manufacturers, saw that there is an opportunity for to help their customers in the challenges around sustainability and how they were having to report. Their customers were having to report and be accountable to their customers in this area. And some saw there was possible business to be gained by being a thought leader or being at the forefront of working in this. But there was also a recognition it's not just about carbon, as our poll just indicated, and that there were other strategies. So not only is it really about the carbon footprint, but what strategies can we follow to overall be more sustainable, such as working with energy efficiency. So let's bring back our attention to the formula itself. We've seen the influence of the formula, its significance in terms of the overall footprint. So the next logical step, we're talking about formulation, formulation of aquafeeds. How do we use optimization to assess ways to improve and help decide on the best course of action? So it serves to remind ourselves that as Aquafeed nutritionists, why do we use formulation? Well, obviously it's there to help us create the recipes, the product recipes. We are trying to achieve target nutrition for animal production, for fish production, but in the most cost-effective way. That's why we use formulation. And in doing so, it provides tools to deal with one of the main challenges, which is the variability in the ingredients that we use in their nutrition, their cost, and even the supply of those ingredients. So formulation has features within it which allow us to maintain the quality of the feeds we're producing for our customers. Now, it also, as a byproduct, or even, well, in my mind, it should be sort of central as well. It provides outputs which include forecasting of ingredient requirements and optimization of allocation. So, for example, if we have short supply of ingredients, formulation can help us with optimizing how to utilize that valuable ingredient. And it helps us plan our purchasing strategy through this evaluation technique. So that's what formulation does. So, given that it decides on the recipe and it helps us choose the ingredients, it's clear that the decisions we make in formulation about the design of our recipes, which ingredients, they're going to have an impact on the environmental measures, the sustainability of those feeds. So let's take a deeper look at why it's the case. Well, here's a simplified view of the supply chain with the feed company here taking in ingredients, manufacturing them according to the formulation that us nutritionists are deciding on, packaging that, distributing it, and putting it into a feeding regime for the animal production. And I sort of isolate these areas because these are sort of areas that they can be tackled individually from a sustainability perspective. for example, we can improve the efficiency of the manufacturing process, and that will have a beneficial impact on environmental footprint. I mean, understanding this whole supply chain will help us also decide where to tackle what we need to tackle from a sustainability perspective, and also whether there are offset or insetting strategies we can follow as well. So, but what are some practical steps that we can take to address the sustainability of our aquafeeds? Well, I think the first step is probably the most obvious step, is to understand where we sit today, understand the current situation, create that benchmark for ourselves. And so I've got a couple more questions at this point. And the first of those is whether you have already done any measurement of the environmental impact of your products. And very, again, simple yes, no, don't know answer here. Thinking particularly of the formula itself, but obviously the influence extends beyond the formula to the delivery to the farm, and the whole production on farm as well. So whatever process you have done, we'll get the results back shortly. Okay, thank you. See the results. Okay, so about 60% of us have done some measurement. So not quite so clear cut this time. And interesting that, there's a fair minority there who perhaps haven't tackled that benchmarking of where they sit today, even though the companies you represent probably have sustainability targets. So the next question here is that for those who did do some benchmarking already, what was the biggest challenge in that? And a few more choices here. Was it the quality of the ingredient data, or just getting hold of the ingredient data to give you that benchmarking of the footprint? Was it around the formula and what the formulas are that you use? Was it the calculation, creating the reporting, or was it more of an organizational issue? And by that, I mean, was it difficult to get all the different parties involved to coordinate and help with that benchmark? Give you a couple more minutes here, or a minute perhaps. Okay, so very clearly here, the ingredient data is the biggest challenge. And that would agree with other times I've done this poll, though the organizational challenges, perhaps the siloed mentality between different departments has been more of a challenge in when I've asked this before. But yes, ingredient data, that makes sense. Okay, so there's perhaps some things here we can talk about in a moment that will perhaps help. Okay, talking of helping, the formulation system obviously manages our Aquafeed recipes. Um, and it can be used to help us understand the environmental impact of that feed in its own right. Okay, and here I'm talking about the ingredients we use inside a feed in their various proportions. What sort of impact does, from an environmental perspective, does that have? And so here I have an example where I'm using a formulation systems reporting tools to show an analysis of where the carbon footprint, in this case, I'm looking at carbon footprint for a particular feed, where it's coming from, and the proportions where it's which ingredients are contributing to the level of the carbon footprint within this particular feed. Now, I am looking at the feed itself and the ingredients we're using. I'm not looking downstream in terms of the transport of this feed, the packaging of the feed, the on-farm production process, animal feed process. I am looking here purely at the formula because we know in any case that this is the bulk of the impact. And so we can use a formulation system if we have the ingredient data to report that straight away for us. We can look at it across products, and we can look at it in detail and analyze it within the product as well. So this is really useful insights. It can help us decide where the main impacts are coming from, or the main contributors to the impact, and help us think about alternatives perhaps, or ways to deal with that. And also a formulation system, having the information inside a formulation system can help us look at trends over time. We might have that benchmark that I talked about. We might have a current set of formulas which are a certain level of environmental impacts of different categories. And as we reformulate over time, we can look at the trends and make sure that we are maybe achieving targets or reducing, or at least not exceeding where we were with our benchmark. So that's a very useful way that we can just utilize a formulation system almost out of the box. But then a recent development is the integration of formulation systems such as ARA, the formulation system I showed you before, the ARA formulation platform from Datacor, integrating that with LCA tools, so life cycle analysis tools, such as Sustel. And a while ago, Datacor announced a collaboration with Sustel to integrate the two tools so that we can, as we formulate, we can pass that data over to the LCA tool and receive back, or store in the LCA tool a full impact analysis for that feed. Now, the advantage of doing this, of course, is that the LCA tool manages that ingredient data, which has been a challenge for so many of you, and it's accredited data. Not only does it do it for the feed, but this gives us a chance to say, look at the full production life cycle for the fish. And that might be the whole feeding program through to finishing the fish. And so the LCA takes the analysis a little further from just the feed into the full life cycle, and we can decide on changes to feeding program, changing the feed themselves perhaps, and see what the impact has been. So as I say, the benefit of using an LCA tool is this integration for a rapid reporting. We're using accredited data to ISO standards. We're asking somebody to provide that for us rather than having to maintain it ourselves. it's giving us a full impact analysis across 19 categories rather than just focusing perhaps on carbon. And so it gives us an advantage in terms of ease of maintenance. And it's a good illustration of the partnerships in industry that I think, should be happening in this area. So understanding the current situation is key. The next step I see customers taking in Aquafeed and other sectors actually is working with ingredient suppliers. Part of it is understanding the sustainability impact measurements within their ingredients. So I think everybody recognizes this is a work in progress in terms of the accuracy and the dependability of the information we're using. And so working with suppliers is one angle. But also perhaps making improvements in those ingredients and for their impact per se is a place to work on. And then the third strategy where formulation is really going to play a part is reformulation. So I think the key parts here, which we'll explore, are firstly, which ingredients do we use? Do we change how much we use of different ingredients? Are there alternative ingredients we can bring in? And also formula composition in its own right. But of course, reformulation must be undertaken with care. We need to maintain cost competitiveness, and we need to ensure performance. So let's look a little bit more deeply at optimization, some of the developments and capabilities that are here. Those nutritionists amongst us will recognize some of this. For others, I'll try and explain in a clear way what we're going to be looking at. So optimization obviously is the mathematical technique we use in order to calculate the best recipe for the nutritional targets we're trying to achieve in a product, using the ingredients and their costs that we have available in order to achieve that nutrition in the most cost-effective way. Now, as we saw with the reporting before, we can actually use that information inside the optimization to get a readout on the environmental footprint of the recipe as we optimize, and that will help us make decisions. And so this chart here that I'm going to show you is a very simple chart. On the x-axis, we have the carbon footprint, and it's mapped. We're going to map that against product cost, okay, here. And then the star that I'm plotting here is I've just done an optimization of a feed. And this is just optimizing normally to nutritional requirements with certain current products, ingredients and their cost. And this is where the carbon footprint has come out on this feed. Now, obviously, we heard before that most of you have company targets for sustainability. And so we want to meet our nutritional requirements at the lowest cost possible, but we want to perhaps move our carbon footprint downwards. Now, anybody who's used formulation will understand that as we constrain something, that is going to impose cost, assuming we don't change anything else. So if I perform that exercise, this chart, I will lay in a chart here. So each column on the chart is a different optimization result, a different recipe in which I have made the solution reduce the carbon footprint. So here from 0.975, I'm reducing it gradually in steps down and below and below. And as we can see, as we do that, the cost increases. At some point, the cost increases quite dramatically. And so this is the cost implication that we mentioned earlier. So again, this is assuming nothing else changes. So we need to look at some strategies to be able to reduce the cost impact or accept the cost, obviously, depending on our situation, our view. And so just mentioned before, we can look at new ingredients or modifying which ingredients we use in which proportion, or we can modify the specification of the product. Now, the reason the cost is increasing, obviously, is that we are forcing the formula to do something different. So let's look at one of those strategies, ingredient evaluation. Here we are looking together now at our purchasing with the eye to not only cost, not only nutrition, but also environmental impact. So we're going to look at replacement ingredients or of modifying the mixture of our ingredients, such as bringing in alternative protein sources. We're looking for a benefit in environmental impact whilst maintaining that nutrition. And if we find a good solution in these terms, of course, we have to make sure that it's still a suitable ingredient to use. It has to be available. It has to be consistent. We have to be able to handle it, etc. So there's lots of considerations to take into account. We do this sort of analysis in normal terms when we're forward planning with for ingredient purchasing anyway. Now, a formulation system like ARA can help us to model scenarios, and we use the term time periods. It allows us to look at a plant or a plant in a different time period. And I would suggest that we use a multi-product optimization, such as multi-mix, because that's going to give us a global view. It gives us a view for the whole plant for the whole period. That's a much more significant way of looking at it compared to looking at individual recipes. And so if we use multi-mix, we can use the reporting capabilities to optimize different scenarios, model different situations, and compare the results. We can compare the ingredient usage, the cost and the nutrition of the products, but also now the footprint of those diets. And this will help us decide on the best way forward. There's also other developments within optimization, and I'm going to discuss a way of optimizing which we could call multi-objective. Normally, when we formulate, cost is the objective, meaning we want to achieve nutrition, but at the lowest possible cost. Now here, we're going to take a slightly different approach. What we want to do is actually also consider in the optimization more of an optimal view on the footprint as well. So we're going to return here to our feed, our Aquafeed that we were formulating before, and this is our starting point. And now, instead of just forcing the carbon footprint lower, I'm going to now consider cost and the an optimal view of where carbon could be and bring into effect a cost penalty, which I'm accepting. We know there's going to be a cost differential by having a lower carbon footprint. But here I would like to incorporate and automatically find the carbon footprint at which there is an acceptable cost penalty. So when I do this method of optimization, now I can automatically find the optimal recipe at which the effective minimum carbon footprint is found. It does this automatically for us. It also, as a sidebar, allows us to identify the shortfall on any particular target. So to explain that more, we had a feed, and without any other consideration, its carbon footprint was 0.975. We have a target. I've chosen a random target here, but let's say our target is 0.75. That's what we would like our feeds to achieve. But we have a cost consideration. And when we bring that cost consideration into play, the best we can achieve is 0.8. And so this methodology finds that optimal place for carbon footprint, balancing cost, and highlights to us the shortfall between what we can achieve and what our target was. And so this is a new technique that we can bring into play. And this, again, helps us to understand where we could be and what the possible trade-offs might be. Now, obviously, it goes beyond the formula itself. It goes beyond the optimization of the formula. We have aspects that we mentioned earlier, the transport, for example, there's packaging, there's production. And a number of years ago, probably about 10 years ago, Datacor, or Format as it was called then, did some research with a feed producer looking at energy consumption in manufacturing. And we found that there was a way to incorporate energy consumption or predict energy consumption within recipes and adjust recipes according to the energy we wanted to achieve. And so we measured lots of batches in order to do this and performed some analysis. And we found that there was a very good prediction from the formula. And as this chart shows, that we're able to generate formulas predicting energy consumption and CO2 emissions in which there was a very, very good correlation between the predicted formula and the actual measurements, which we see here on the y-axis. So you can see from this analysis, this was a very clear relationship. And this held out the possibility of adjusting formulas and affecting something else down the line, such as production. And I think maybe there are other possibilities, such as understanding impacts of formulas on aspects of animal production or other aspects. So just to wrap things up with a few conclusions before we go to some questions, I'd like to first of all mention a few future possibilities that we could imagine here. I think there's the opportunity to optimize the whole supply chain somewhat, and a part of this is linking with LCA tools such as Sustel. So formulating, as we formulate today, that is essentially looking back down the supply chain. We're selecting the ingredients. And in doing that, we incorporate the cost of transport. We can also now, because we're optimizing with sustainability parameters, we're able to select based on those sustainability parameters which ingredients we should use. But there are also downstream effects on what the formula does, because obviously we need to maintain effective performance on farm. But there may be incentives on farm as well, which we need to consider and then bring those back into the formulation to help us with our decision making. And so I think there's a possibility here for optimizing this whole supply chain and using technology to make those linkages in the models we use. I think there's further optimization developments to come as well. I think there's potential for developing the optimization algorithms of the type I was just illustrating, where we are able to say, hey, look, across this solution, why is this carbon footprint what it is today? What are the interactions at play, and try and find alternatives more automatically than we're able to today. And I think maybe there's a way that this is a place that AI can help, where AI can interact with the optimization algorithms which work so well today to help us explore alternatives. But of course, we need to recognize this is beyond carbon as well. And so I have done some work already on optimizing multiple environmental factors within one solution and looking at the cost and benefits of those, again, whilst maintaining nutritional parameters of those feeds. So I think there's interesting areas that we may look into in the future, may need to look into. But as we've seen, the formula has a direct environmental impact and influences also aspects of production. We all know of throughput and quality aspects that formulas have impacts on. The formulation technologies and LCA tools will be able to be used to provide insights into the source of environmental impacts. And I think formulation is uniquely placed to help us assess and actually put into action impact reducing measures in the area of ingredient evaluation, product specification modifications. And perhaps I should say something a little bit more about specification. As we've seen, it's possible to ask the formula to come up with a lower carbon footprint, for example. But there could be waste in our product specifications, which are unnecessarily adding environmental impact. And I think formulation can help us identify those areas because of the input, because of the way optimization data is given to us. We can look into that, and all nutritionists are well placed to understand that information and act on it. I think there's also room for, and we'll see new optimization techniques being developed to derive better recipe outcomes. But I think a holistic view is required. It's not just the recipe, it's beyond the recipe as well. There's collaboration needed, and improved data exchange is going to be needed. And again, thinking of formulation algorithms, there are, in our systems at least, there are available nonlinear and multi-objective algorithms available, which help us solve some of the more complex aspects of this. So for you as a company looking to make progress in the recipes you manufacture, some of the strategies, the key strategies to take away, I think, are firstly, do some work on the current situation, understand that current benchmark of where your formulas currently are, work with suppliers to improve data and get better data, even if they may know it but not be sharing it. Work with them to improve the footprint of their ingredients. Assess reduction strategies, and this is where formulation can really help. And then form an action plan, do something about what you find and make some decisions about that. So at that point, we draw to a close, and I say thank you for attending. I hope you found it useful and interesting, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Well, thank you, Ian. Now we'll open the Q&A session. So if you have not submitted your question yet, there is still time. So let's start first with a question about the categories that your software has, that are other impact categories other than just carbon footprint, for example, biodiversity loss, water use, land use, being considered to be used in the formulation software. And it also links with a comment, which was not a question, but it was a comment that says, feed producers have developed sustainability indices, and salmon farmers are also measuring feed-related metrics, such as fish in, fish out, and forage feed dependency ratio to assess the sustainability of raw materials. So how that all incorporates in your software.
Yeah. So what I would say is the beauty of formulation systems is the flexibility. And so I've worked with companies who focus solely on carbon, and others that work with all 19 of the recognized categories and others. So certainly when you're using our formulation system, you have the capability to add these categories. Now, we're not suggesting that we're providing that data. That's not our role, but we are providing the tool by which you can measure those. Some companies choose to maintain that data themselves and source that data from their suppliers and from databases which are available, such as the GFLI, and maintain that data themselves. So the short answer there is yes, you can have as many categories and other parameters as you like inside a formulation system. Where I think we saw from the poll, data is an issue for many people, and that's where LCA tools can come into play, in which you can sort of delegate that to a reliable source and use formulation to interact with it. And the LCA tool, the LCA tools that I'm familiar with, such as Sustel, they all work with multiple categories. You may have a lead category that you're being measured on. But I also, so some companies, carbon, other companies, they'll have, I've seen them with top 4 categories, land use, water use, carbon, and another one that and 4 seems to be a good measure. And they may even try to do some sort of combination of those to give an index. And I've done all of those within formulation. They're all possible. And so it's really adaptable to what you need in your situation.
Okay, thank you. According to your opinion, who should be responsible for curating the impact data on LSA tools? And how can the industry guarantee that all ingredient suppliers are using similar standard?
Yeah, again, I think this is a work in progress. I think it's certainly not the software provider's place. I think it's the industry organizations are working on this, I would say, from my observation and attending different conferences. So I think as time has gone on, this has resolved itself or is in the process of resolving itself. There are recognized databases. I mentioned the GFLI. And so I think it's you make sure that you are using accredited sources, and else the LCA tools that we've been talking about are using accredited sources. So the ISO, and it's certainly if a company is saying this is information that you can rely on, or within which standard can they rely on? So GFLI is not the only database. There are also developments around the fact that it doesn't cover every ingredient. There are local ingredient sources which are not covered, perhaps. So it is a work in progress. There are certainly others more qualified than I am to comment on those, but I think it's the accreditation side, and it is a work in progress from what I see.
Okay. How do you see technology evolving in the future to help nutritionists with sustainability?
I think I hopefully touched on some of that at the very end there, where existing optimization techniques can be applied to the environmental question. There will be new techniques, I think, not just for environment questions, but just I think the whole area of formulation is constantly being improved to help us ask questions and answer, respond more quickly. So I think it's all linked. Technology-wise, integration is important. That's happening now. The optimization piece, as I say. So I think it's about connectivity and being able to have the tools which allow us to do that sort of cost benefit analysis, which incorporates actually cost and nutrition effect on farm. So it's modeling that whole supply chain. I think that needs connectivity and work to give a full picture. So I think it's in that area.
Okay, and one last question. What strategies do you see Aquafeed customers adopting in relation to sustainability?
Again, I think there are definitely others better qualified than me to comment, but what I have seen is ingredient sourcing, assessing different supplies of what you might say are the same thing, alternative ingredients, maybe novel ingredients. I'm not so familiar in Aquafeed of additive ingredients which may improve efficiency, but I think overall the other area, so it's around ingredients, it's specification as well. So I think we have to probably be a little more analytical about our product specifications to remove unnecessary waste. A very general example would be if we're formulating protein too high when it's actually amino acid profile that's the key performance driver. If we shift our specification to the key performance driver, that will affect, I know, it will affect the sustainability index of those feeds. And so I think we have to be wise about that and choices, but also be very careful that we maintain performance. So ingredients selection, specification, and another area is just general efficiency in production, which, everything interacts. So the specification will have an interaction on the ingredient selection, of course. The formula will also have an effect on the production. Production's needs and how to be more efficient there should be reflected in the product and how we formulate. So I think that holistic thinking and how everything is connected is very important. But I think they're the key bits.
Okay, now one very last question. It was said that Datacor's formulation software plus Sustel allows to analyze the full life cycle, including the production of fish. How is that done exactly? Are there some parameters such as feed conversion ratio or nutrient emissions being predicted by the software?
Yeah, so to be clear, it's the LCA tool. Its name suggests its role, life cycle analysis tool. So we, as Datacor and a formulation system, provide details on the feed, and that includes the ingredients, their sourcing, the formula, and that's integrated in a secure connection dynamically with the LCA tool. The LCA tool allows you to set up farms, essentially, with a feeding program of the different feeds, which are obviously coming from Datacor's system. And then the LCA tool does the analysis of incorporating things like feed conversion ratio, accounting for species, location, original source of feed, and where the farm's located, to give that footprint analysis of the full production cycle. So taking everything into account from the sourcing of the ingredients through production, delivery, on-farm growing. And so it's a complex calculation. On the feed side per se, it's reasonably simple. It's what I would call a linear summation of factors of ingredients. It gets more complex, and that the LCA tool is responsible for that part. I think you asked about technology. I think a feedback loop. There is a feedback loop, but I think the more dynamic feedback loop for while we're optimizing will be a way to go in the future.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your insights today, Ian. And that's all the time we have for questions today. I would like to thank all our attendees for taking the time to join today's webinar. The recording will be available tomorrow. I want to thank our sponsor, Datacor, for their participation today. For more information on their products and services, please visit datacor.com. And finally, I would like to extend a big thanks to our speaker, Ian, for his time today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and see you next time.
Bye.